What is it this time, Golex? I'm getting tired of all this back and forth.
We wouldn't have to do this if you didn't interfere with my people.
Well, excuse me for wanting to improve their conditions.
You talk about us like we're an anthropology subject. You arrogantly presume you're here to civilize a group of primitives in return for our everlasting loyalty.
Would a little gratitude be uncalled for? I'm giving your people resources and political opportunities. Before, you would have just stood by eating Zwell's shit. That is when they even deign to acknowledge you.
And we're supposed to be grateful because you deign to acknowledge us? What have you even offered us, really? To become part of the glorious Penguin Union? How is that any different from what the Zwellians claim to offer?
Because with us it isn't bullshit! How many fucking centuries have Lithos had to bow and scrape for whatever little crumbs the Zwellians gave you? And you don't get to vote, you don't get representation, you're used as foot soldiers and mercenaries.
What you're offering is simply to change the flag we bow and scrape under. The only entities who have agency in your country are penguins.
Penguin supremacy's just a fact of life, buddy.
Are they not the animals who kidnap?
Some, I think. But that's a hormonal thing.
Don't some penguins commit necrophilia?
Adelie penguins are fucked up. We don't let them into the legislature.
Don't some penguins mate in fecal matter? I said, don't some mate in...
Shut up!
Weren't a bunch of South African penguins recently killed by bees?
Cut transmission.
Salty, won't you carry it in?
Hiya! Penguin Truth here, and it's time for more Otaku Evolution. Be sure to like, subscribe, and contribute to my Patreon. Today we're returning to a genre of anime I don't talk much about. Fantasy! And no, not the fantasy that I might have some actual viewers. I'm talking about the kind with dragons and magic. So, more believable than me getting viewers. What is it about fantasy anime that makes me so ambivalent? Why don't I embrace it as I do science fiction, modern adventure, or even drama? In my top 30 anime TV shows and OVAs, Vision of Escaflowne is the only representative of fantasy, and that's also partially mecha. I've so rarely reviewed fantasy anime on Otaku Evolution, especially the standard castles and caverns type of fantasy, that I feel a little unqualified to speak on it. But I might as well get a larger sampling of kinds of anime while I'm examining it. The problem is, I don't really vibe much with fantasy anime. I can barely finish any. I never even finished Somali and the Forest Spirit, which I felt had potential. I think the newest fantasy anime that I watched in its entirety was Rage of Bahamut Genesis, which was good, but nowhere near good enough to make my favorites list. I think the big problem is that too much of today's fantasy is generic isekai, or trapped in an RPG, which is just isekai in disguise. But even back in the day, there were plenty of disappointing bland fantasy anime. Ruin Explorers has unfortunately one such title. Not that it's excessively terrible, mind you, but it's just empty. Ruin Explorer is a 4-episode OVA from 1995 that sees the journeys of a team of, you guessed it, Ruin Explorers named Ihrie and Fam. Ihrie is a tomboyish sorcerer and sword fighter who is hesitant to use her magic, for a good reason we find out, and Fam is a catgirl Wiccan who calls on the spirits of nature for only constructive purposes. Together they search for the ultimate power so that Ihrie can lift the curse put on her. The two are ostensibly friends, but they argue and bicker constantly, mostly caused by Ihrie's insensitivity.
I'm sorry that I've held you back, Ihrie. Since I'm so dense and dull, I won't bother you from now on.
Oh, come on, Fam.
I really mean it. I really am going to go right now.
Sure you are.
I'll never come back again, you know? I hate you, Ihrie!
She's so easy to read sometimes.
They come across another pair, also after the ultimate power, Rasha and Miguel, who become their rivals at first, but then reluctant allies as they help the prince of a lost kingdom, Lyle. Lyle is looking to avenge his people on their betrayer, Raguduroll. To do this, he must collect 3 mystical objects to gain the ultimate power. But like Ihrie, Fam, and the other ruin explorers, the power is sought after by Raguduroll too. It all comes to a head in a climactic final battle in the ruins of the country of Rebard.
I hope that you can put up enough of a fight to make this interesting.
As you wish!
Mere children's toys.
And it's so uninspired! First of all, characters and interactions are all pretty stereotypical and predictable. You've got your incompetent but plucky sidekick, the pretty but scheming rival, the sword guy, the destiny guy, the unscrupulous merchant, and the generic mad with power villain. Everybody seems to have stepped off the assembly line for fantasy and indeed overall anime character types. I feel like I've seen these same interactions ad nauseum in a dozen other anime of the time and type. The plot is pretty paint by numbers too, with no big twists or memorable moments. They spend 2 episodes looking through dungeons, 1 episode on a ship, and then the last one in a castle, so there's very little actual ruin exploring going on. Even when we learn in the last episode that Raguduroll's motivation for seizing power was initially to assist the poverty-stricken countryside of his country that got ignored by the capital, it's just kind of shrugged off and the villain doesn't feel conflicted at all going into the final battle. I think the only thing that stands apart in this OVA is Ihrie's curse, which is to turn into a mouse every time she uses a lot of magic. Yeah, that's right. She turns into a mouse. But they don't really do a lot with it, like having her squeeze into passages nobody else can, or evade large opponents who can't move fast enough to get to her, or any number of things you could do with that plot element. She doesn't really do much as a person or as a mouse, to be honest. Just a small amount. But at least she doesn't have a big ego. She's a modest mouse. It's also a little strange that the real emerging main character is Lyle. We learn about Rebard, a once thriving country that was destroyed practically overnight by Raguduroll, and it seems like he did it by himself. Wow. Lyle lost his true love in the destruction and seeks the 3 treasures to battle his nemesis. He's the one here with the real pathos in hero's journey, learning to overcome his tragic circumstances, but they don't even let him fully emerge either. There are no moments of self-doubt or reflection, no conquering of great obstacles and mastering of new skills. You'd think if they were going to essentially replace Ihrie and Fam as main characters with Lyle, they would have, done something with Lyle. He's just kind of there to beat the final boss.
You still have much to learn, my dear prince.
Oh, and another thing. Ruin Explorers is not funny! Anytime it tries to insert a little levity into its plot by pulling faces or showing pratfalls, I cringe. It's making no effort to be original in its humor whatsoever. Probably because the characters lack the charisma to really carry a gag. Now, I might be as funny as a case of COVID, but even I know when to fucking reel in the unfunny, wacky bullshit. Ruin Explorers does not.
It's impossible!
Hey, are you okay, Russia?
This can't be! I tasted all the food as I was holding it! Oh.
What might have been in those bottles, I wonder.
I was wondered about that too. You're not going to get away with it, you little brat!
There's nothing special about the production values either. Sure, once in a while you'll see an animation boost, but most of the time the movements and environments are very plain. It feels like a world only populated by a handful of people with very little of any world building, and the action isn't even that interesting, either sword clashes or magic battles. The closest we come to an exciting exchange is in the episode on the ship when Ihrie discovers her magic can harm Raguduroll. The final battle at the castle is nothing special. Everything seems played out and lazy, like they didn't even want to bother making things interesting. Even the music can be lethargic, and that's even done by Masamichi Amano, who really impressed in Giant Robo. Disappointing. The whole thing is just disappointing. I'm sorry, but I just could not get into this title. It feels like warmed over Slayers. And I'm not even that big on Slayers. But at least Lena Inverse and the gang are charming. Ihrie and Fam are lifeless and bland. What is it about fantasy anime that bores me to tears? Maybe it's just because the same tropes are hammered into the ground in most of the fantasy anime I've seen. And that's one thing, I guess. There's nothing new under the sun. But at least some titles have engrossing characters. The characters in Ruin Explorers couldn't be more generic if they tried. And trying is something that Ruin Explorers didn't do. I guess I'll just stick to watching Vision of Escaflowne. Wait, is FMA fantasy? FMA and Escaflowne. Next time on Otaku Evolution, furries. Until then, see ya!
Please tell me that she's not going to stay like that.
She takes these pills.
Next stop, Raguduroll's castle.
You have to stop all this, General.
Stop what exactly?
You know exactly what. Things have come to a boil with the Lithos. Rumors are that violence could explode at any minute.
Violence, huh? Can't imagine why.
What exactly is your motivation for all this? Aren't you just nursing an old grudge against me?
Oh, Your Highness. You think too highly of yourself. You don't even enter in my mind when it comes to the Lithos. But you know who does? That assassin on your payroll.
What does he have to do with this?
You have custody of him, do you not?
He comes and goes as he pleases.
Well, isn't he the active little killer? I do recall him having killed some important penguins some time back.
And that's what you want from this? To avenge those penguins? And you'd risk the lives of this clan for that?
I haven't a clue what you're on about, Cassis. The Mark II, that is, Penguisha, needs a parking spot. This is just the convenient place for it. The thing about Ravix? Just a free-floating thought.
You're really proud of yourself, aren't you? Coming here, rubbing my nose in the past, manipulating others. I was like that once, but it didn't do me any good, and it won't work for you either.
Well, something has to.